and I'm looking in the direction of Dr. Premie Naicker, Diversity and Inclusion, Integral African Feminine Leadership. Dr. Premie Naicker, a recent graduate from the Da Vinci Institute, has over 25 years of experience in the IT industry and has experience across a range of various senior executive roles for multinational software companies. Premie really talks technology, and you will find the passion is there. She's also passionate about the development of people, technology, and equality, and hence the focus of this topic of hers. She previously operated as a green skills consulting, advising business on skills development, strategy, digitization, and customer centricity prior to joining as managing director of EMEA in a current organization, Fuse Forward, which is an Amazon Web Service partner. And I read a very interesting article about Amazon this morning. Her practical experience combined with the theoretical backing of the MBA that she did prior to that and the PhD has helped to explore and develop new models of leadership and organizational development for the 21st century. Now, Premie, welcome here this afternoon. My first question to you, and I think that's on the lips of many people, what is integral African feminine leadership, Premie?
Okay, so I just want to say, firstly, thank you to everyone that's made the time to actually join today's Curiosity session. It's really nice to see a lot of my friends on this call, Monica and Ellie from Spain. And just to let you know that we had got off a call earlier on, and I invited Monica and Ellie to join the Curiosity session. And we spoke about what is feminine leadership. And I think Monica's coaching is around feminine leadership and embracing feminine leadership, because so often we tend to want to emulate behaviors of other people to look and feel like them. And so it's getting back to our authentic selves. But just to give you a little bit of context on myself, as HB gave me a beautiful review. I think, I had reached many existential crises in my career and in my life, and there was a total imbalance in the business. And I felt like I was leading a life that wasn't mine. But saying that, it was an amazing journey. And then I came across a PhD program run by Transform and basically underwritten by Da Vinci that basically looks at integral development. It looks at the integral four worlds model and many other frameworks that I used for my research, and eventually formulated my own frameworks based on the integral development model. So, I mean, as I said, I was totally imbalanced, and I did an inventory to look at where my strengths were and where my weaknesses were and why I was feeling the imbalance. And what I found was very interesting. So being African and being Indian, I had not experienced to area life. So truly, I was being inauthentic to who I am as a human being and as a woman, as a person. And when I looked at I was very strong. I was educated very much in the Western way, doing an MBA, doing a lot of self-development courses and things like that. So it was very Western in the way I had educated myself. And then secondly, organizations based in America, based in Europe, I took on that persona, and I'd actually forgotten who I was. So, being born fourth generation Indian in South Africa, there was this whole African heritage and culture that I hadn't actually considered in my life. And then, on the East, I basically had this whole beautiful Eastern culture or heritage that I was born into, and I'd never really explored that. So for me, it was basically looking at those two areas and focusing on how I could develop that to reach very much a holistic developmental perspective. So that's where the whole integral African feminine leadership started. And I looked at the challenges that we're facing in South Africa and the rest of the world. So women empowerment is a huge topic of discussion, lack of skills, lack of jobs, looking at the whole patriarchal landscape that we're actually living and working in. So I had to really go back and look at things from a historical context. So used for my research, I did a qualitative research and basically used a narrative method to look at my own experience and then from an individual perspective, and then look at other women's experience and men, by the way, from a collective perspective. So the model that I used is called, I used a thing called the 4 trans model, which basically looks at things from a transpersonal perspective. So who am I as a person, as a leader, as an individual? What is my calling? What is my inner calling? What am I passionate about? And then how do I take that and use that to actually make an individual or a leader? And then basically looked at it very much to the transpersonal perspective. Then I looked at it from a transcultural perspective. So how do we incorporate the different cultures? I mean, South Africa is a very diverse country. Africa is a very diverse continent, and we have so many different cultures that we're dealing with and working with on a daily basis. And how often do we take the time to learn the other's culture? How often do we take the time to learn our own culture? And culture is so important, whether we're dealing with community, whether we're dealing with business. Actually embrace that cultural element. And how do we look at everything from a different cultural perspective? And also taking a transdisciplinary perspective, because so often we siloed in our thinking. All we want to do is work on STEM, or, all we want to do is focus on a specific discipline. So how do we take a transdisciplinary perspective? Because ultimately everything integrates. And I think, speaking from a leadership perspective, we do need to look at things more transculturally, transdisciplinarily. And then all of that leading to transformation, because we talk about transformation, and transformation is very cliched. It's the buzzword. Sustainability is a buzzword. Take these words and create meaning out of it, because I think language is very important, and what we say is very important. And as leaders, if we don't look at ourselves and transform ourselves, how do we transform our organizations? So very much looking at the 4 worlds model, which is the South, the East, the North, and the West. And so taking the best of all 4 worlds and integrate it into our world. Because there's so much good in the North and the West, and there's so much good in the South and the East. And how do we incorporate that in everything that we do? And so I think it just brings a different dimension.
Thank you, Premie. And as you were speaking, the question that is on my lips, maybe it's a bit loaded, but what would you say are the most valuable qualities of female leaders? And then maybe second to that, if you can give us a reflection, and I think back to one of the remarks of Portia on employability, what are the principles that you would argue are important for effective leadership?
Yeah, so I think for me, what really moved me forward in my life and my career is education. So education is key to everything. I really, really believe that. And as I said to you, I'm really passionate about technology. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I'm really passionate about people development. And I really believe, and Portia spoke about the soft skills, we're always focusing on the STEM skills. What about the soft skills? Because so often we're lacking in those soft skills. And so for me, the question you asked is, what are the most valuable feminine leadership qualities? Yeah. I would say having good business sense is important, because, we are businesswomen. We are business people, and generating revenue and income is important for us to run our lives and our businesses. So that for me is critical. Having empathy, because that is a very strong, I think that's a very strong quality of women. And I think we need to bring that more to the fore. We really need to practice empathy in dealing with the other. We drive ourselves down to the bone. We try to do as much as we can. We try to be superwomen. And at the end of the day, we lose empathy for ourselves, let alone empathy for the other. Compassion is for me really, really a very endearing quality that human beings have. But so often we don't use compassion in our daily lives, in the way we lead our businesses, in the way we lead people. We forget about being compassionate. It's trying to basically show people how tough we are as leaders. And when we are compassionate, we show a weaker side of ours. And I really don't believe that that's true. So I think if anything, really made us consciously aware of it is that, we have to show compassion, we have to show empathy, and we have to care, and respect and trust. Because so often, you spoke about the remote working. Companies don't trust. If they don't see you at your desk, they don't trust you, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be there at 8 and you have to leave at 5. So there's this whole big trust component that comes into play now. How do we trust our people to work from home, to work remotely? So that's a big thing for me. Trust and respect. How do we respect each other? How do we respect the mom that's both working and that's looking after kids and looking after family and looking after her parents that are in their 70s and 80s and trying to juggle all of these things? We need to respect each other for that. And I think men need to look at this and look at women and show some compassion and respect and empathy, and try to work and assist women in this process. So yeah, for me, that's authenticity. For me, is the biggest quality that we really need to bring to the fore, because so often we try to be someone else. We try to emulate men, and try to behave. And I speak for myself, my own experience, and it doesn't work, because then we lose that authenticity of being a woman. I think it applies equally to men, because it's not just a female thing. Authenticity is a human thing. So it's how do we get back to our authenticity and behave like human beings, and not as a man or a woman. And we're so bound by these binary terms that we use that we don't look outside of that.
We should not apply a gender lens to this. But that being said, there are definitely unique qualities, and you shared that with us. And I think I fully agree with you. Leadership is changing. So reflecting on your topic, the question is, how would you lead as a female, working with men in a workplace? Obviously, there's the horses for courses principle, but how do you lead? And I'm the first one to say, being a male myself, there's definitely things that females can do much better, and they can, and we must work together in a co-creative spirit, to almost be like an orchestra that's in symphony. But how would you advise us now in this audience this afternoon to lead with feminine energy? Because I want to use the energy specifically, because I sense that when I listen to you and our previous engagement, and I would love to get your view on that.
Sorry, Javier, before we move on to that, can I just ask Premie something? So Premie, really liking your presentation and very insightful. I just maybe want to share something with you. A long time ago, we also did a study looking at males and females. And then what we found was that we were looking at communication styles of leaders, and, whether the communication styles of female leaders differ from that of males. And what was interesting about the study was that there wasn't actually, it wasn't actually about whether you're male or female. What actually was interesting was that there were some males with very feminine kind of communication styles, where you would typically find males who are very empathetic, compassionate, etc., and where you would get females that would have what we then started to term as a masculine style, where you also get your feminine and masculine cultures. So it was quite interesting that it was not necessarily linked to gender, but that it was actually quite a preferred style. And that in some instances, some people, actually some of the most effective ones, were able to adjust their style depending on the situation and depending on who they were engaging with. I just thought I would just share that with you as well.
Yes, Francel, and I absolutely agree. Because my research also, men are equally empathetic and men are equally compassionate, and it just depends. And we have both this feminine side and the masculine side. And so when we think about business and we think about profit and we think about revenue generation, we look at it as something that men do, but women can do that just as well. And then we look at empathy and compassion and we think these are all female traits. No, it's not. It's both male and female traits. So it's about finding that yin and yang and the balance between your masculine side and your feminine side. And it's about not being afraid to actually use it in the situations that you need to use it for. So again, I think this whole remote working thing, we also have to be cognizant of turning our speakers off and muting ourselves it's trying to be more disciplined, especially online. And I know a lot of people forget to turn off their mics or turn it on. Just today, I just want to read this quickly for you. I had a meeting earlier on, and one of my colleagues she thought she had muted herself. And she said, my apologies to you, both for the on-mic side effects and sounds. I thought that I had muted. Laura is always late for her music lessons. I think I need to invest in a loud alarm. So I said to her, no worries, it happens to the best of us. It's a reality that we have to work with, and everyone understands. So another colleague of mine said, it's not my day. This morning I had the dog jump onto my chair during a session too, and at least he looked good on video. So these are the challenges that we're facing. And I think we also have to be empathetic towards these kind of challenges and work with it and just take it in our stride.
To your point, that we're actually crossing over from male and female, and there's this diverse spread where you have a balance in between. How would you say one need to deal with the concept of diversity and inclusivity in South Africa? Because I think that's quite a lot of discussions. People sometimes, my view, use the word very loosely and say they're inclusive in the interactions. They embrace diversity, but it's, to your point earlier on, it's maybe just buzzwords and people don't really understand what it means. Your response to that?
From a historical context, we can go back into the apartheid system in South Africa. And for those that don't understand it on the call, I mean, all of us that are South Africans, we understand, apartheid was an architected system. And so, when we speak about equality and we speak about, Ellie is on the call and she mentioned, what are we talking about? Are we talking about equality or are we talking about equity? And so as a woman, what are we looking for? And just to touch on that. So we basically, if we look at inclusiveness and we look at equality, we look at the space, and let's use South Africa as an example. From an IT perspective, I am normally the only woman in the boardroom. Okay, I am normally the only brown woman in the boardroom or the black woman in the boardroom. And so if you look at that, there's an thing wrong with that. Okay, so we can look at it and say, well, historically, because of apartheid, because we're seeing all of these inequities in South Africa, but it's just not South Africa. It's a global issue. It's a global challenge where we do not have enough women in IT, enough women in leadership, enough black women in IT, enough black women in leadership positions. So there's a lot of inequality. And if we want to transform as leaders, we really need to look at these things with a very focused lens. And we need to create strategy that actually builds room for and diversity. So when we talk, it's not just about women. We talk about the LGBTQ community. So we talk about, when I went back and I looked at feminism, I get very offended. I used to get very offended and defensive when people called me a feminist. And I just didn't understand, but I'm not a feminist, I don't understand. Feminism for me is a very Western construct. 100 years ago, women in America and in the UK were fighting for the right to vote. It's only 100 years ago. We in South Africa, so me as a brown woman in South Africa, as an Indian woman in South Africa, as a black woman in South Africa, only got the right to vote 2 years ago when we went into democracy. So I just cannot relate to that. But then also being a woman in South Africa, a brown woman in South Africa, a black woman, there's so many intersections that I have to look at. My race is a problem, my gender is a problem, my education is a problem, my class. So I've got all of these intersections that I have to work with. So I went in my research, I went through a methodological approach to feminism. So there's an element of feminism. So I don't get offended when people call me a feminist anymore because I understand the historical context. And so I went through a very deconstruction. So I deconstructed the whole feminism. I looked at intersectionality. I looked at womanism that speaks to embracing women and men and working together. So these other forms of feminism actually started speaking to me. And I thought, well, I can relate to intersectionality. I can relate to womanism as an African woman. And then I created my own framework, which looks at womanism, which is a W-humanism, because ultimately it's about humanity. Isn't that what we're all trying to work towards? So, yes, I'm a feminist. I'm an intersectional, I'm a womanist, and I practice womanism. So it's going through that whole cycle, and how important understanding and exploring historical context in order for us to move forward. So often we get stuck and we don't understand why we're stuck. We get defensive and we don't understand why we get defensive. So for me, it's educating yourself. I mean, we've got Google. We've got so much of information available. So I think as women and as men, we really, and I think Portia spoke to that as well, is go and do your research, understand what's happening in the world. Critical thinking is so important, with all the fake news, technology that's being thrown at us and the social media. We really need to critically analyze and critically think about what's out there to make up our minds and to make up our own decisions. What's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. So coming back to inclusion and diversity, I think leaders have a big job to do. They need to go back to the drawing board, and they really need to look at how do they become more inclusive and more diverse in their strategies, and how do we implement those strategies then to create more inclusion and diversity in our organizations.
No, thank you, Prem. I think there's some valuable lessons. I just want to come back to Hercules. Hercules, you got a comment to make?
I just wanted to ask can we stretch it? If we look at gender lens, cultural lens, and technological lens to define leadership, can we say the values and emotion we use currently to define leadership are limiting to new leadership models that we require? Even reflecting on what defines a woman or defines a man, we also have now robotics that we must lead.
Yeah, I think, we need to create a more diverse view on values, because your values might not be the same as my values. Your culture might not be the same as mine. But actually, if you think about it, we all ascribe and prescribe to the same values. And, whether we read the Bible or the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita, it teaches us the same values as human beings. They're not very different. It doesn't matter what our religious background is, what our cultural backgrounds are. It all teaches us the same principles. It's how we choose to use those principles and how we choose to integrate those principles into our lives. And it comes back to basic values like culture, respect, like, compassion. Those are basic values. So, and then we have the technology components that we have to deal with. And so, how do we actually work with that? Because you've got AI, and AI is making all of these decisions for us anymore. So we don't have to think anymore. You've got machine learning. One machine's talking to the other machine. And as human beings, we're starting to emulate those behaviors, right? So we need to take a step back and we need to reevaluate what's human and what's machine, what's technology and what's, so that hard skills and the soft skills, again, balancing the two. So, I think for me, technology is not the differentiator. For me, it's the norm. I use technology on a daily basis. I run my business using technology. Everything I do revolves around technology. And so, that sometimes can be so overwhelming. And then when you take a step back and you think about, as a human being, what is important for me? What are my values? Am I going against my values? As a woman, am I trying to emulate a man's behavior to get ahead in my life? Am I going to put my values aside just because I need that business? I need somebody to give me the business, and that so happened to be 10 men in a boardroom. No, I'm not going to do that. I am going to be authentic. and lose the business based on my value system, then so be it, because then that's true authenticity and I'm living my values. And often we tend to vacillate between, do I need that business? Do I put up with what that man is saying to me? Do I sell my soul to the devil to get this business? And it's a tough one, especially now. We're all looking for money. We're all looking for business. So what do we do? I mean, do we sell ourselves to the devil? I asked the question and I put it out to the audience there. We're grappling with these challenges on a daily basis, and more so in a country like South Africa, where we've been in an economic downturn for the past, I don't know how many years. We've had the pandemic. We actually have so many challenges that we're dealing with. And so often it's easy to say yes when somebody, waves that contract at you saying, okay, if you do this and that and everything else, then I'm going to give you the business. Be a front for me, be a BE candidate for me, so I can get the business. You don't have to do any work, but, just put your name on this contract so that we're a BE company. I'm sorry. I think we all have a conscience, and it's about awakening your consciousness, because that's what we're not doing. We're not looking at these things and saying, like, how do we deconstruct this apartheid South Africa that we've been living in for so many years? And we've got all these amazing tools. We've got amazing people. We've got amazing businesses in this country. We've got technology. Guys, we really, guys and girls, sorry, we really don't have to, put our values aside when we want to do business. I think for me, that's true power. It's having a voice in that boardroom that so often we don't want to say anything because we're so afraid that we're not going to get the business and we're going to offend the men. I'm sorry, for me, that really, I've walked away from business. Because I don't believe that it works with my value system, but also it goes against everything that we're actually working towards. So that's me.
Yeah. Don't we think the current lenses that we have in defining leadership, like we talk about emotions, emotional attributes, and we use them, for instance, to reflect, I'm a woman, so I'm using these emotions, I've got these attributes, or I'm a man, I've got these attributes. I'm saying for future leadership of where we're going, don't you think the current lenses that we use are limiting for us to build future leadership models?
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. So it's how do we change? Because change starts with the self, right? So every leader needs to start with themselves. You need to take a deep dive and look at yourself as a leader. How are you going to change yourself? Because if you can't change yourself, how are you going to change your organization? So it's going back to basics and saying, well, these are the things that I'm lacking as a leader. And how do I equip myself with these skills to be able to lead in the 21st century, whether it's becoming more technologically savvy, whether it's becoming more people savvy, whether it's becoming more empathetic, because you're not an empathetic person. So it's about developing all differently in this 21st century. So maybe I'm still not answering your question, but I guess we have to reconstruct ourselves as individuals to reconstruct our organizations into the future.
Yeah, but I hear you, Premie, because what you say, we can become our own biggest enemies by being constrained, by thinking gender. We must rather say, let's go in there and try to not use the old classification terms and honor our values and really engage with each other. So it's not about whether you're female or male, whether you're black or brown or white or purple. It's not about that. Let's talk about the issue. But as long as we almost use these lenses or these classification systems, we're standing in our own way. So as we move forward into Africa, and I really, you said you believe in technology and you've got the entrepreneurial spirit. And then I would ask, so as a person living on the continent of Africa, as a South African, where do we take this forward? What are the lessons learned? What's the best way to overcome this? Because I hear you clearly. We don't want to go there, but unfortunate reality is there's many people that it's stuck in the old ways. So how do we overcome this? How do we need to think about leadership in future? Maybe the younger colleagues must come in.
Well, it was interesting. I do some coaching with some young ladies and Marlene's on the call, and a lot of the ladies that I work with are from UJ, because I do some work with UJ. And I had 2 of the young ladies in my office. I mean, every year I coach one person. I spend 100% of my time with this one individual every single year. I give them everything from skills, from going to restaurant, writing proposals, from everything that I would do. I pass that on to my, on my coachee or my mentees. And so I had the 2 young ladies in here, and we were having a conversation because the one lady wants to start a coaching business. So I said, well, okay, the 2 of you are sitting here, and the one was complaining about the other, and she says, oh, she's just so long-winded, and she spends 2 hours on the call. And I said, well, what do you discuss? And basically what they said to me, oh, we talk about everyone else, and we talk about so I said, have you ever sat down and tried to speak about what are the challenges we're facing as women in this country or in the world? And if you unpack that and you start building and create solutions to address those, then there's already you are developing your skills, and you're looking at developing other young people's skills. And I think it's in Africa, we're really blessed in that we have such a burgeoning young population, unlike in the West, where you've got an older generation. We've got so much of young talent in this country that we can nurture, and we can basically use all of this energy. And the young people are just so intelligent. I mean, they have so many tools at their disposal. They know so much. And so often we're not listening to young people. It's how do we embrace young people, and how do we work with them, and how do we coach them and mentor them, and to show them that they have these amazing talents and skills that can be put to good use. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just technology in the Industry 4.0 space. One of the skills that we need to compassion, because so many of us don't have compassion, and it's a skill that we actually need to teach. Emotional intelligence is a skill. And what they're saying, and the research, Portia has just quoted every piece of research out there, which is amazing. And I'm not going to go down that road again, because all that data and the research is out there. But what are we doing with it, and how are we using it to make impact and make change? So if we go back to young people, critical thinking, a big skill that's needed. Compassion, is another skill. Emotional intelligence, social intelligence, relationship intelligence. All of these we talk about creating new for the future jobs that we need to start looking at for the future, because with everyone just focusing on social media and WhatsApp and not talking to each other, we have a major psychological crisis going on in this world. And so what are the new jobs going? It's just not STEM jobs. It's going to be those people skills and those human skills that we need to start developing. And so there's enough new jobs out there. It's just putting ourselves out there and looking and thinking creatively and nurturing the new skills that we need. So I hope that helps.
No, thank you, Portia. And I'm reading here from Anneline that says dream leaders. Okay, there disappear the content, so I need to go and find that chat quickly. Dream leaders define their own position and do not dictate to others what position they should adopt. They grow and help others. And as you were speaking, you spoke about the colleagues at UJ and Marlene. I reflect back to a discussion that me and Franzel started, but we didn't finish that. And maybe I must pose the question to you, Premie, and say, with your position, and you explained to us the importance of mentoring and coaching, who do you look up to for inspiration and mentorship yourself?
Well, you know what, we're coaching and mentoring everyone else, but as leaders, who's mentoring and coaching us? We don't know everything. I mean, I go through similar challenge as other people on a daily basis, and I'm mentoring and coaching myself. Sometimes it would be good for someone else to mentor and coach me. And so I've reached out to Monica to say, well, Monica, let's do a trade exchange. You coach me and I'll coach you, and you mentor me and I'll mentor you. And, we both do that with Ellie. Ellie's on the call as well. And so we said the next discussion that we're going to be having is on, what was it, Monica? Sorry, I can't do, oh gosh.
Monica, you must come in here.
Imposter syndrome, Naicker. Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, because so often as women, we suffer from imposter syndrome. So, we don't believe that we're good enough. We don't believe that we have so much of power. We don't know how amazing we are as women. And so we believe that, if I'm not really good in finance, but I'm good at everything else, then I'm an imposter, because men are so amazing. They're good at everything, right? And so what we start doing is we start questioning our own abilities, and we start questioning ourselves, and we think, well, you know what, I shouldn't be the CEO of this company. I don't feel, that doesn't sit comfortably with me, because I don't understand finance as well as my male colleagues do, and so we create this imposter syndrome, and we want to delve a little bit more into that and unpack that and deconstruct that, and then reconstruct what a feminine leader should actually look like. For ourselves as individuals. So I'll always use my own experience, and before I look at the next person, and I think, well, what did I do in my life that got me to where I got? What were the things that I needed more help on and more assistance on and more support on? And so for me, it's how do we support other women? And just going back to what you said earlier, is that we shouldn't look at it from a man's perspective or a woman's perspective. The reality, HB, is that there is a big gap between men and women. There is a big gap for women leaders in almost every sector that we look at, locally and globally. So it's about how do we start reducing that gap, and how do we create the equality and the equity. It's going to take, Melinda Gates said, even though women in America have had the right to vote over 100 years ago, it's going to take another 200 years for women in America to reach a status of some form of equality and equity. So if America is saying this, imagine what we're actually going through in Africa and in South Africa. So if that gap is so wide in a first world country, we're actually stuck between a third world and a first world country. So what does that look like?
I sometimes wonder if we'll ever be able to erase that gap. Maybe we'll sit here in 1,000 years and we still have that discussion, because we have all these challenges and it's real. And the moment you're making progress, is a person that come from the left-hand side that derail you on this one. And, that's reality. And, it's actually very sad. And I'm thinking about this quite a lot.
I do think that we tend to have a bit of and I'm going to be very harsh, a victim mentality sometimes. We literally go, everything is stacked against us. Leadership, particularly, I think for me is a really interesting point to look at in terms of what I'm saying, because to be a leader means to overcome challenges. If you do not overcome challenges, with all due respect, you don't deserve to be a leader. And it sounds harsh, but I do believe that as women, we have to look at ourselves. We have to start solving problems, growing other people, irrespective of whether we have positions or not. Leadership is not a position. It's a way of being that shifts the world. And so I have a favorite quote. It says, look for big problems. They disguise big opportunities. So if ever the world was full of big problems, it's right now. There are more opportunities for women than there have ever been, and we need to jump up and make it happen. One other little thought, just in terms of what you were saying about the gap in the US. I was also on a call recently around gender issues. It was race issues, actually, in the US. We're ahead of the game. We are genuinely ahead of the game. I know we don't feel like it in South Africa, but we're actually ahead of the game. They don't even know how to have the conversations.
Surely there's more to this. Anybody else that want? Elizabeth, you want to say something?
Yeah, hi. I agree with Premie, and I also think that what Hercules was saying about the lenses. I think the important thing here is for our generation or the generations that are older, is to know ourselves, but try to change the lenses, even if it's difficult, because sometimes the beliefs are deep inside. But that would allow us to show the children who are, the really true changing maker in this world, how they are equal one to each other, and color doesn't exist, race feminine, masculine, they are the ones who can be leaders and work together in that, then I think it is very important to work on ourselves, our generations, but have in mind that the importance is what you were saying before, I think was Premie, about deconstruct. Yeah, but it's very important to deconstruct the way that we are teaching, the educational system, but not in the university, in which skills. All of this, it's very important, but it's critical to start this in the really, really young age. We are working in a little village in Limpopo in South Africa, actually, and we were asking the little girls and the little boys, what do you like about being a girl or being a boy? And this is when we could see the big differences. The one was no worries, just play with the ball. But the girls that had a strong role model at home were like, to be truly myself, to know my values and be someone who can do good for the world. And the girls that has a more not constructive home, they were like, well, being a girl is nice because I can have a dress and be pretty and like to the boys. And you could see the big gap even in between, the same village, how when you have changing the views of the mom or you have the more traditional lenses. I don't know if I'm explaining right, but just to summarize, I think the most important thing is to do the lenses work, but in a really young age, and all the gaps and all the skills, soft skills, very important. I believe that in soft skills is critical and more in the world that we are, but in the really, really, really young age.
Well, I think what we then say to each other by embracing diversity and becoming more inclusive, and that's to Premie's topic. And Portia, I also see your comment there. We can actually be better at what we do, and that's the solution of Africa. And we understand the challenges of apartheid. We understand the challenges of gender discrimination. And you switch on the TV and the radio, and you open a newspaper, that's what we see. But I think behind that sits the opportunity for diversity, and we can really move that forward by just embracing that and saying each of us have a strong point. Maybe I must keep my mouth quiet today. This is not my strength, and like vice versa. And then in that process, we also understand that we're constantly in a reskilling environment without any doubt. But what I also then, and I've asked the question on the lessons, Premie, but maybe now reflecting back, and it's quite an interesting discussion how it unpack. We must ask ourselves, and maybe to you and Janet, and I'm asking myself the question, Elizabeth and Monica and Hercules, and to the other people that are very quiet. What is that one decision that we think we should never have made? We made a mistake. Because for me, in the mistakes, there's a lot of lessons learned as well. Now, we spoke about some of those mistakes, but at a personal level, thinking about diversity and inclusivity, what are the mistakes we need to actually nurture and say, I learned a lot from this, and I should never go down that aisle again. I become more powerful, and I know yourself. I see that there's a chat in there. Any views to that response?
I'm a fighter and I'm a challenger, and I'll always challenge the status quo. And people don't like that. They see you as a troublemaker. You raise these issues in the boardroom. You're not a team player. You tend to be ostracized. And Janet spoke about the victim mentality, and so often we fall back on that mentality. And I'm not saying that I did. And what I used to do was basically pack my bags and leave. And I really left some amazing organizations because of that. There were a lot of opportunities that were given to me, and I worked very hard for it. But at the same time, there were times when I would just keep quiet and walk away from it and not fight the fight. It does get tiring. It doesn't matter how many times you break the glass ceilings, you come away with a lot of scars and a lot of hurt. And you think, well, what is the point? And then you reach those existential crises in your life. And like me, I go and climb Kilimanjaro, and I go and do a PhD. And, I'm trying to find something big and challenging because the work environment just does not challenge me anymore.
What we sometimes lose, people don't have hope. They don't see the power of diversity. So maybe the question that we should ask ourselves is, what inspire people? What motivate people? If we focus on a common enemy of a commonality, we can actually get beyond this discrimination and the eye flaps that we can't see past. And we must maybe say, let's look at the future into the positive. Well, what's inspiring to us? What make you tick? Because we're going to come back, looking back 5 years from now and say, wow, we've moved a lot of ground, and that would be great. But how are we going to get there? What's that inspirational theme? And what would you share with the audience? And maybe Portia from your side and Janet and the people that already reflected, how it inspire people, how we give back to the younger people using Elizabeth, your boy-girl example that you spoke about.
HB, I don't know if I can come in here.
Yes, please, Portia.
Okay. I think for me, thanks Premie for raising this as well. I think for me, there are so many stories to be told, but people don't get to reach out to people like ourselves often. I think on the odd occasion you meet people, and women are quite harsh to women. It's not always easy, and they don't necessarily pave the way. So, I think for me in my daily experience, I mean, I'm a single mom, widowed, 16 years, raised 3 girls, got them through university. And I mean, there were scary moments where, I resigned from jobs because of marginalization, because I feel I have got what I need, and I've earned it. So, when everyone tells me what to do or how to do it, it's from their perspective, and I often ask, why do they do it? Why do they say things like they say? And often it boils down to marginalization. So I think the quicker you teach young girls how to know themselves, what to do with their lives. I mean, I mentor my daughters every day, with jobs that they need to take and so forth. And you'd be amazed how many corporates actually, corporates or individuals in corporates, I should say, marginalize young people, with salaries, with their worth, with their experience. How do you do that to individuals who haven't even entered a workplace, but you already make them feel less of themselves? Yeah. Sports is another topic completely as well. So I think for me, it's teach young girls who they are, that they are independent and they have that choice of being independent. I think, you look at the newspapers, you look at the crime, you look at the rape cases, you look at all of these. And in most instances, it's because females, young girls, don't feel they have another choice.
Yeah. I think to be comfortable with who you are and to take pride in that, for me, and to use your common sense and think. Monica, you have something to share, please?
Yes. For me here, there are 2 main things. Basically, is not only, if may I use this verb, teach maybe my daughter or mentor my daughter, but ask my daughter how she sees herself, what she wants to be, what she feels, what she wants for her world. And I think our children, future generations, have this very clear. And we have seen that because they only have one objective: African children, Chinese children, Argentinian children, American children. We have seen that this year and last year too. The only thing they want is to save the world. They are united. They are not maybe talking as we are now, talking about maybe some people see it as gender, some people see lenses. How beautiful is, ladies and gentlemen, that our children are focusing into the world, in saving the world that we have been, may I say, destroying. So for me, the first thing here is we have to know ourselves, not because it's something beautiful and holistic, but because knowing myself implies that I know my values, that I know my limits, that I know all the yeses I'm going to say to myself and all the no's I'm going to say to a world that I don't like to be part with or part from. This is the first thing. And may I say that when you do this from a woman point of view, you connect with many, many gifts that have always been with you. I am talking here about neurohormonality. I'm talking about cognitive abilities. I'm talking about using non-violent communication to talk to other women, to other men, so we can all be united and work as one. Because you know what? The thing here is that we have an uncertain world. And Janet, I agree with you. A true leader has to earn to be a leader. And for me, a true leader is the one who is going to understand this uncertainty of this VUCA world we are living, this with volatility, with uncertainty, with complexity, and with ambiguity, and transform it into a world that we deserve living in. Because we think that this world is ours. And we are wrong. Men, women, cats, dogs, I don't mind. We are wrong. We have been given the possibility to live here. So yes, knowing yourself, but giving the new generations the possibility to know themselves also in a pleasant, non-directive way. Because once you know who you are, nobody is going to stop you in a bad point of view. And you are going to know, as Premie was saying, when it's your time to live and when it's your time to stay.
The onus is on us as women to lead, to form companies, to create opportunities. I'm probably one of the older people here, but my mother did not work. She was a stay-at-home mom, and I had no role model. Nobody showed me. When I had to go to work and move into leadership positions, I couldn't go to my mom and say, what do I do? She's taught me many things, and believe me, she's a phenomenal woman. And today she is leading all over the place at the age of 82. But at the time I needed guidance, mentoring, coaching, my mom couldn't give it to me. We have to be that for the next generation of children.
HB, if I could add, perhaps.
Yes, please, Portia.
Okay. I think what I want to, I think we talk about females, we're so easy to box people. Yeah. And I think one of the things I found, which I thought quite relevant, was we box generations. So we tell, generations, they Gen Z, the millennials. And I found in something around the post-generational workforce. So there is the shift away from, generations, and there's a new concept called perennials. Okay. So perennials describe an ever-blooming group of people of all ages, stripes and types who transcend stereotypes and make connections with each other and the world around them. These are people of all ages who continue to push up against their growing edge, always relevant and not defined by the generation.
Toto, I just saw you revealed your face. Do you want to add to the discussion?
Few years, maybe 10 years ago or so in South Africa, there was an initiative of bring a girl child to work. And because at that time we were looking at how to empower women and so forth. And if you think of those children 15 years ago, where are they now, those girls? Most of them are in corporate. They are somewhere doing something good in their lives. But what about the same boys or the boys of the same age whom we left? So I think that was one of the gaps that we created in trying to solve a problem. And I think going forward, like the last speaker talked about in terms of the whole society, we can't go on blaming history for what has happened. We need to grab what we have from the history, but try and raise our children in a way that we don't slap a boy when he's crying to say, don't cry, be strong, you're a boy. And a girl, it's fine. If she wants a doll, give it to her, whether she's right or not. we need to strike balance. And I think it begins with everyone and who is either a parent or having a chance to raise a child. And as they grow, as much as we say we don't want to teach them color, they don't have to see whether I'm black or white or something. The same mentality, I think we should apply in terms of them respecting the ladies, and the ladies knowing that these are meant to respect us as well as to protect us. Yes, a man's, if we have to look back in history, one of their major roles is to protect the feminine gender. So I think we should make sure that we don't create then that inequality, which most of us are creating as parents between children. If I come, I expect the boy to go open the gate and leave the girl to say, this is the boy's job, go open the gate. If they have to wash dishes, let them do their chore together, because we trying to create a situation where each one sees synergy, each one realize that if Daddy is doing the garden, he doesn't need to be held by the boy child only. Let them all work, and they grow with that mentality. Now, when it comes to job and everything, these kids will be well equipped, because they would not have to go through what Premie went through when the male counterparts were declared as better than her or any other person, because they know that this is my counterpart. This is just a human being like me. We just differ because he is male and I'm female. So I think it's up to us how we raise our children from now on, because fighting about what is happening now in the job sector.
Let's look forward, yeah.
It's good to put up a fight, but we are not building. We are not building solid bridges. We're patching here, it breaks tomorrow, we patch here. Let's do a solid foundation and expect the fruits over the coming years. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I really appreciate this open discussion. You know, it's important that we talk about this, but our time is running out. So, Premie, if I can maybe look in your direction for the last time and say, as we started here this afternoon, and thank you to Portia, and we had the discussion, everybody from the floor. But Premie, any final thoughts or advice to the members in the audience?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think dialogue is a very, very important thing. It's a very important tool in business and in our personal lives. It's, we need to have more dialogue. We need to stop arguing and fighting. And the thing is that we need to reflect and we need to listen more. And, and then take action, because so often we're taking action without actually reflecting. So for me, it's being able to reflect and then take action. It's being able to have dialogue and give the other person a chance, and it's being able to listen, because we don't actively listen. We just want to speak, and we want to speak our minds and say what we have to say. We're so busy saying that we're not listening to the other person. I want to have my say. To the point that we just block out anything that's of relevance or important or we can learn from. And so, my parting comment would be, have more dialogue, be more consciously aware of what's happening around you, be more reflective, and then take action, because you can't just reflect and not take action. You have to do both in tandem. So that's basically my parting comments. And as women, yes, we're all leaders, and we must lead, but at the same time, we must support in the process and pay it forward, because that's what we often don't do. It's about what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of this? So my parting comment is say, be more supportive and be more collaborative, and do it in the true sense of partnership. So, yeah.
Thank you for that words of wisdom. And also, Portia, your contribution was much appreciated. And if I listen carefully, you're writing another book, so there's quite a fruitful thought here that you can add there. But also to the people that participated, and it's really much appreciated. And for the comments on the site, it's a pity it's past. I don't want to run over the topic, but okay, it's definitely a discussion we will need to revisit, and we will keep mind of that. And I want to thank you for this. This is our last Curiosity for the year. Only on the 23rd of February we'll have the next one. We are also launching a thinking society where we're going to start an online book club, identify a book and we'll read that and we'll share with each other. So that's coming. I would have loved to give a few final thoughts, and I made some notes, but I think we all found value from this, and there's no need to recap. We're smart people in the room. So thank you for this. I will go and think about and ponder some of the ideas as we move forward. And I will challenge all of you to wrap up and say, let's together make a difference, embrace diversity, be inclusive, and then march forward, and let's make this country and let's make this planet Earth a better place. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon and the evening. We'll touch base in due course. Thank you very much.